Day 6. The cabin was rotting. Dark streaks bled from the walls, thick and sluggish, like coagulated blood. The air reeked of decay, wood rot, damp earth, something metallic and sour beneath it all. The floor, once solid, had turned treacherous beneath their feet. It swelled and sagged, as though the structure itself was breathing, a slow, labored inhale. They had stopped trying to distinguish day from night. Time meant nothing here. The lanterns flickered, even when no wind moved, casting twisting, writhing shadows that seemed to stretch and reach for them. The entity did not rest. And neither could they. Cassie sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, rocking back and forth with mechanical precision. Her lips moved constantly, whispering something low and rhythmic, syllables that didn't belong to any language they knew. Sometimes, she would pause, tilting her head slightly, as if listening to something just beyond their hearing. Then she would laugh, soft and breathless, before resuming her murmuring. No one asked what she was saying anymore. No one wanted to know. Erin clutched the journal to her chest like a lifeline, her fingers digging into the frayed edges of its pages. The ink inside shifted when she stared too long, some of it hers, some of it not. 7 nights. We have to last 7 nights. She whispered it, chanted it, sobbed it. If she said it enough, maybe it would be true. Maybe morning would come. Maybe it wouldn't. Jake pressed his palms against his temples, trying to block out the pressure that had been building inside his skull for days. It was getting worse. The entity had worn them down, piece by piece. It had started with whispers, things they dismissed as wind slipping through the cracks. Then came the voices, familiar and cruel, slipping into their minds when they tried to sleep. Now, it was more than just voices. The shadows had weight. The walls moved if they weren't watching them directly. And the door. The last time Jake had tried to step outside, the door had opened to nothing. No trees. No sky. Just an endless, gaping void that breathed against his face. Warm. Wet. Alive. He hadn't tried again. Sam sat near the dead fire, staring into the blackened coals as if willing them to flicker back to life. His knife rested in his lap, the worn handle smooth under his fingers. He had been gripping it so tightly, his knuckles had gone white. It was the only thing that felt real. But even that was changing. Earlier, when he had glanced down, the blade had been rusted, bent, warped. Now it was clean again. He wasn't sure which was worse. The entity didn't need to attack them. It only had to wait. Hunger gnawed at them, but none of them trusted the food anymore. The cans had begun to rust, their contents turning black and writhing. The water smelled like copper. And something worse. The walls groaned as if under an unseen weight, their wooden frames bending, protesting. Something inside the cabin had changed. It wasn't just watching them anymore. It was closing in. They weren't fighting to escape anymore. They were simply trying to survive until morning. If morning would come at all. Night 6. The cabin was rotting around them. Dark, oozing streaks ran down the walls, thicker now, pulsing like open wounds. The air reeked of decay, damp wood, and something sharper. Iron and rot, the unmistakable scent of something dead and breathing all at once. And then Sam snapped. He let out a raw, ragged scream, grabbing the old book, his hands trembling, his eyes wild with fury and terror. He tore pages free, flinging them to the floor. The brittle paper scattered like dead leaves, curling at the edges as if they were burning without flame. The words mean nothing. Nothing, he shouted, voice cracking. We're trapped no matter what. We don't make it out of here. We don't. The cabin responded. A deep, guttural groan shuddered through the walls. Not the sound of wood shifting. Not the wind. Something organic. Alive. The air thickened, pressing in on them, squeezing their lungs like a fist. The candlelight flared, shadows elongating, stretching, twisting into something that watched them back. And then, a soft shuffle from the hallway. Something moved. Something that had never stopped hunting them. And then she stepped forward. Cassie. Her head tilted, eyes wide, glassy wrong. Her skin pale, too pale, veins blackened and webbed beneath her skin. Her limbs stiff, awkward, like she had forgotten how to move. Jake's stomach dropped. Cassie had been taken last night. They had lost her. Erin let out a sharp, choked sob, pressing herself against the wall. Sam froze, his mouth open, but no words came. Cassie smiled. Or tried to. Her lips cracked, splitting like something old, dried and hollowed out from the inside. She took one step forward. Then another. A jerking, unnatural motion, like she was being pushed from within. And then, in a voice that wasn't hers, she whispered, "You let me go." The door exploded open. A shockwave of freezing air blasted through the cabin, knocking over chairs, sending candles spiraling into the dark. Beyond the doorway, there was nothing. No trees. No night. Not even emptiness. Just a void, endless, pulsing, breathing. And in the void, it stood there. The tall, thin entity. Watching. Waiting. It had stalked them from the trees, lurked in the shadows, whispered in their ears as they fought to stay sane. And now it had come for them. Its head tilted in that same, slow, unnatural motion. Its limbs too long, its fingers brushing the ground, moving only when they didn't look directly at it. Jake couldn't breathe. Sam staggered back, his breath coming too fast, chest heaving. Stay together. Stay the fuck together. The void surged forward. Something wrapped around Sam, invisible but undeniable, dragging him toward the open door. His screams tore through the cabin. Jake lunged, fingers closing around Sam's wrist. For a second, just a second, they held on. Then Sam's eyes widened. The force pulled harder, harder. His fingers slipped free. The last thing they saw was his face, contorted in sheer, unbearable terror, as the darkness swallowed him whole. The door slammed shut. Cassie's body crumpled, collapsing to the floor like a marionette with cut strings. Her empty eyes still locked on them. A final, sickening twitch. Then nothing. But the tall, thin entity did not move. It was still there, waiting in the dark beyond the door. Its head tilted again. And then, slowly, deliberately, it stepped back into the void. Erin collapsed, sobbing, hands clamped over her ears. Jake didn't move. He couldn't move. His fingers still tingled where he had held Sam's hand. He could still feel the warmth. The cabin shuddered. The walls bulged inward, the air vibrated, the very fabric of reality fracturing.